Hey y'all, welcome to your first year of drum lessons, week 14, drum pad edition. My name is Penny Larson, and I am very happy to have you with me today. If this is your first time here, I encourage you to check out the playlist, Your First Year of Drum Lessons, on my channel, and you will see a progression of what might be your first year of lessons if you were studying with me. Today we're going to do something a little bit different than our previous lessons. We're going to do a whole pile of rudiments. And the reason for this is we're going to do the multiple bounce roll and the triple stroke roll, which are going to be a little bit different techniques that we're going to have to talk about, especially for the multiple bounce roll. But then we're also going to go over the double stroke open roll variations. We've talked about a few. We've talked about the 5-stroke roll over on the drum set. We've talked about the 6-stroke roll. And we've talked about the 9-stroke roll. And I've kind of referenced the rest of them, but I think we did the 17-stroke roll as well. But we're going to run through all of them just so we can sort of see how they work. And then we will have done the whole first page of rudiments, because we started a couple weeks ago on flam rudiments. So this way we'll knock out that first page, and we'll only be dealing with the second page for new ones for the rest of the year. Which isn't to say we'll be done with these, but we'll at least have explored these. And then I'm also going to play for you Raspberry March, which is the snare solo we've been doing the last couple weeks. I uploaded a video last Thursday of me playing the piece on a snare drum, and I'll include a link to that below. But I want to play it for you today with a metronome and without a metronome. And I want to talk about a couple sticking issues, because as I was working it up to play it on the snare drum, there were a couple places where I felt like if I changed up my sticking from what would be the normal sticking, it just made it flow better for me. It's only a couple. Mostly it's pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm also going to show you a couple different drum pads today, because when we're working on some of these things, the different feels of different pads can be very important. We've talked a little bit about how the gum rubber drum pad, so if you have a drum pad by Vader, if you have a drum pad by Real Feel, pretty much the typical drum pad material is some variation of gum rubber. That's what I have in this blue circle in the middle. On the outside I have neoprene, the black surface, and that's a little bit stiffer of a rubber. So here's the gum rubber. And you can almost hear how the response is. Here's the neoprene. So here it's a little snappier. Interestingly, I wouldn't say that the rebound is greater. The rebound is different. Okay? We're going to use two other pads where the rebound is much less than this pad, and I'm going to explain why when we get there. The first thing we're going to do is the multiple bounce roll. I'm going to do it first on the gum rubber pad, so you can see how this will work when you have the maximum bounce. The multiple bounce roll, probably more than any other single thing on the drums, is totally about controlling the bounce. I really don't use my fingers at all. I press down, and with how I am controlling my thumb and first finger is how I control the length and quality of the bounce. So we want to start you want to play a note and try and get that buzz sound to extend as long as you can. We used to call this the buzz roll. I got yelled at by a timpanist for calling it the buzz roll. We're supposed to call it the multiple bounce roll. So we're going to call it the multiple bounce roll. It also gets called the press roll, the closed roll, the buzz roll. Some people call it the orchestral roll, but I really hate that one. But multiple bounce roll is its official nomenclature name. So let's stay with that. Having said that, the sound that you're trying to get out of it is bzzz, right? So the technique is somewhere between this, pressing down hard, stopping all those bounces, and this, right? Just letting the stick bounce freely. The thing that's happening now, because I'm doing one out of context, you're really hearing the attack, and then you're hearing the multiple bounces fade away. Right? When we do this together, so let me do this with the left hand too, just so you can see. And if you notice, I'm putting my thumb way in front and on top of my index finger, and I'm opening my hand to facilitate extending the bounces. I'm getting the bounces by pressing down with my thumb on the stick in front of my index finger, so that's working like that fulcrum that we've talked about before. See, like that. So I'm pressing down in front of, on the front edge of my index finger, and that's how I'm getting my multiple bounces. When I play the multiple bounce roll as a roll, what I'm trying to get is zzz. The multiple bounce roll is basically the one way that we can kind of make the snare drum, especially because it has those snares and it vibrates in such a way that it will sing in a way that toms don't exactly. You can do buzz rolls on toms, sure, of course you can. A lot of times, sorry, multiple bounce rolls, see? A lot of the time, tom, just the head of the tom is going to be a little loose to try and do a multiple bounce roll, but you can totally do this technique on a tom. But the combination of the snare wires and this multiple bounce roll is going to give you a nice sustaining sound, hopefully. There are two things that you can really change about this. One is how fast your subdivisions are. So if I played like quarter notes and then eighth notes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And then I added 16th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So on the pad, because it's so articulate sounding, the 16th notes are really where I get that buzz sound of the multiple bounce roll, right? Okay. The other thing you can change is the dynamics. Sometimes when you're playing a quiet buzz roll, it helps if you move the sticks to the edge of the snare drum. The head is a little bit more trampoline-y at the edge. It's a little bit tighter feeling, right? In the center is where it's the loosest because it's the farthest away from the edge, which is what's providing the tension, right? I apologize for the truism. That I hope is pretty obvious. So you can move to the edge to get a little quieter. Also, at first, if you're having trouble with this technique, if you move to the edge, a lot of times that can help. That can help you like slide into this technique. So I mentioned we were going to try a couple different drum pads today. The first one is called an E-pad. I think it's made by E-pad. This material is called Enduraflex, and it's very not bouncy. This pad is really not great for multiple bounce rolls. It just doesn't have the rebound, right? I mentioned multiple bounce rolls are probably when you're going to need the rebound the most, because that's what you're controlling in a multiple bounce roll is the rebound. Okay, so we're going to come back to this pad in a second. For the multiple bounce roll, this pad ain't a great thing. But I've got this pad, which is essentially a drum head mounted on a backing. And the point of this pad is to feel and sound a little bit more like a drum. It still is very stiff and bouncy compared to all but the tightest tension drums. And I think you can hear that. But because this pad feels a little bit more like a snare drum and sounds a little bit more like a snare drum, when I play the multiple bounce roll, I can feel those bounces a little bit more. I can hear those bounces a little bit more. This is one of those times, I know a lot of you are working with just a drum pad for now before you get a drum set, or maybe because of the situations in the world or your life, you can't access your drum set. Different types of pads can be really helpful to work on different techniques when you can't play on the drum set. I probably have, oh goodness, I probably have 20 different drum pads, running the gamut of different rebounds and different sounds, just so I can work on my technique in a bunch of different ways. Okay, so that's the multiple bounce roll. Next, we're going to do the triple stroke roll. The The triple stroke roll is basically the double stroke roll kind of on steroids, okay? So now instead of just 2 notes on each hand, I've got 3. It is very easy to let yourself try to rely on the bounce for the triple stroke roll. I don't think you should. I think the triple stroke roll really sounds like the triple stroke roll when you are working hard to make all of those notes with your fingers. Let's talk about that a little bit. So I'll play it, I'll switch over as I speed up, and I'll rely on the bounce, okay? Okay, so on the gum rubber pad, I can hear basically all 3 of those notes. It gets a teeny bit mushy, right at the top, but I can basically hear all of those notes. But if you take that technique and you put it on a drum, it turns into mush. And guess what it sounds like? A multiple bounce roll, right? What we were just doing. So when you work on the triple stroke roll, really try to make sure that you are articulating all 3 of those notes clearly. Let's go back to our Enduraflex pad, our E-pad, that doesn't provide, it doesn't give me the opportunity to rely on the bounce, right? If I try to rely on the bounce, I get that, okay? So instead, right, you want to be able to hear da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Right? My left hand was getting a little mushy there, right? My left hand made me grumpy just then. You want to be able to hear 3 clean notes from each hand, because otherwise there really isn't a point for the triple stroke roll to exist, okay? If you let it bounce, if you let it mush out, it becomes a multiple bounce roll. Who cares, okay? Just because you can say you're playing 3 notes on one hand or the other, if I can't hear them, I don't care, right? So when you work on the multiple bounce roll and you work on the triple stroke roll, whether you work on them on a gum rubber pad or on the snare drum or a pad that's designed more to be like a real drum, or even this pad is kind of specifically designed to be even less bouncy than a snare drum, right? Pay attention to the 2 different techniques, okay? It's going to be super important in the long run to have these different approaches to making sounds with sticks. Okay, so next, we're going to go through all of the double stroke open roll rudiments. Number 6, the double stroke roll, we've talked about several times before, so we're going to brush over it pretty quickly. That's just 2 notes on each hand. And for now, you can mostly just be thinking that you're making those notes. Remember we talked briefly about the open close technique that I'm using, there's a few different ways to get that second note. But for now, you almost don't even have to worry about that. Your technique for your double stroke roll can be separated from learning the patterns of these rudiments, the double stroke roll rudiments, because we're going to be working on them kind of in tandem. So it makes sense to run through all these patterns and talk about what they are while also working on your technique, right? These are all just patterns. So once you've learned them, sure, you can work on them. I'm not saying don't work on them, but working on them becomes part of something bigger usually, whereas the double stroke roll technique is technique, right? These are patterns, that's technique. They're related and connected, but they're different. So much so that I would almost say working specifically on your double technique while working on any of these patterns might be a little frustrating. You want to separate them. You don't want to get bogged down thinking about too many things at once. Remember, I'm a really big fan of reduce the things that you're working on. You want to laser focus on what you're working on so that you don't get overwhelmed and what you're working on doesn't get blurry. Okay? So, number 7, the 5-stroke roll, we've talked about this before. This is a roll that's a half a beat long, right? So 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and, 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. Okay, so it's 2, 4, 5, 1 E and 5 notes. So number 8, the 6-stroke roll. When I was little, my drum instructor taught me this as an inverted 5-stroke roll. And I still think of the 6-stroke roll as an inverted 5-stroke roll. So if I ever call it that, I apologize. 6-stroke roll is 6 notes. It is related to the 5-stroke because we've got 2 doubles, but now we've got 2 accents instead of just 1. This takes up a whole beat. 1 E and right? And this creates a really cool rolling pattern when you do it over and over again. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4. And unlike the 5-stroke roll, this one repeats with the same hand, so you need to work on the left-handed version as well. Okay. Number 9, the 7-stroke roll. 7-stroke roll lasts a whole beat sort of in the same way that a 6-stroke roll does. It takes up the whole length of the beat, and then we get on to the next beat. So it's 3 doubles and a single. That's how we get to 7 strokes, right? 2, 4, 6, 7. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and Likewise, this one repeats on the same hand, so you need to work on the left-handed version as well. Number 10, the 9-stroke roll, we've done this a few times. This is a roll that lasts for one full beat, so from the start of one beat to the start of the next beat. This roll starts and ends with the same hand, so we can do alternating, right hand starting, left hand starting. 1 E and a 2, 3 E and a 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Number 11, the 10-stroke roll, is a 9-stroke roll plus an extra 16th note. 1 E and a 2 E, 3 E and a 4 E, 1 E and a 2 E, 3 E and a 4 E. This is another one that repeats on the same hand, so we need to work on the left-handed version. In the 11-stroke roll, there's a lot of, they're really closely related. The 11-stroke roll, number 12, is almost the same as the 10-stroke roll, but now instead of that second to last note, that first of the two 16th notes being a 16th note, it's a double stroke. It's two 32nd notes. So 1 E and a 2 E, 1 E and a 2 E, 1 E and a 2 E, 3 E and a 4 E, 1 E and a 2 E, 3 E and a 4 E. This is another one. Starts with the right hand repeatedly, so now we need to work on the left-handed version. 1 E and a 2 E, 3 E and a 4 E, 1 E and a 2 E, 3 E and a 4 E. The 13-stroke roll lasts for a beat and a half. So we're going to start on 1 and play all the way to the and of the next measure. 1 E and a 2 E and, 3 E and a 4 E and, 1 E and a 2 E and, 3 E and a 4 E and, 1 E and a 2 E and, 3 E and a 4 E and. And that's one of the ones that alternates, so we only need to work on the one version. Here's another one with a repeating right-hand lead version. The 15-stroke roll goes for a beat and 3/4. 1 E and a 2 E and a, 3 E and a 4 E and a. And if you remember, when we first talked about the 7-stroke roll, I said the 7 takes up the full beat, and then the next one starts on the next beat. The 15-stroke roll is the same sort of thing. It takes up 2 beats, like from the 1 to the but not that next downbeat, okay? The 15-stroke has a left-handed version as well. 1 E and a 2 E and a, 3 E and a 4 E and a, 1 E and a 2 E and a, 3 E and a 4 E and a. And lastly, the 17-stroke roll. This is the one that does take up 2 beats fully and inclusive of the next downbeat. 1 E and 2 E and 3. Okay, I'm going to do this in 3/4 so we can get through it. This is another one that alternates. 1 E and 2 E and 3. 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 Okay, so there is either a ton of material in there or not very much material in there, depending on where you are, how you're doing with the double stroke rolls, whether you've done multiple bounce rolls before or triple stroke rolls before. There's either, wow, lots of new stuff or not very much new stuff at all. Either way, right, whether this feels like, oh my God, she's totally killing us this week, or, wow, I know the rolls, no big deal, right? Either way, I encourage you to go through these one at a time, play them with a metronome, play them without a metronome, try and make them sound good, sure, but also just try to get comfortable with the patterns. If you've seen these patterns a lot before, try and think about some new way that you might approach them. And if you're thinking of these patterns for the first time, make sure that you're counting them. So say number 11, the 10-stroke roll, 1 E and 2 E. 1 E and 2 E. Right? Make sure that you're putting everything in the right spot. I would even count the space at the end there. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and So you're sure that the roll is relating to time correctly. The whole point of these patterns is that they are rolls that last a certain amount of time, and learning these specific patterns means that any short roll, any roll that's 2 beats or less, outside of something kind of weird, you should just have in your hands. Okay? So that's it for rudiments for today. The other thing I want to do today is we're going to look really quickly at Raspberry March, which we've been going through the last couple weeks. And like I say, last Thursday I uploaded a playthrough on a snare drum. And so that's how it sounds finished version. What I want to do today is talk about, like I say, there were a couple points where I noticed, hey, if I did the sticking a little bit different there, it helped. But also I want to do it with the metronome at a couple different tempos, just so you can see what it sounds like all the way through at a couple different tempos without it being on a snare drum and the, having the intensity of it being an actual kind of performance overwhelming you. Okay, so the big one for me is if we look down 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line, the first measure, I would normally play this left. I've got offbeat 16th notes, right? So remember our right hand lead concept is that we're playing our left hands on the E's and the A's, okay? So I would normally play this left, 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 right. And now I'm set up in a weird place where I could do this accent with my right hand, and that's technically, by our concept, what would happen because this note is on the and this note is on the 3. But I found that when I went to play it, if I played this second group of the 16th and the 8th on the E after 2, if I played that right, left, so I played left, left, right, and then here, right, left, right, right? So then I'm in the right spot for the right, left, right. And honestly, I think that was the one big sticking change that I made that isn't that big a sticking change. But the one place where I felt, as I was playing through it, if I do this, it'll make my life easier, right? And remember, that's what sticking choices are about, is making your life easier. It's not, no one cares what sticking, like unless you're in a drum line and everyone's doing the same sticking. If someone just wants to hear you play music, no one cares what sticking you use. Most people probably don't even understand that drummers alternate hands and that there is such a thing as sticking, okay? So nobody cares. What they care about is how it sounds, okay? And a lot of times making your life easier as a performer will help you to make the sound you're trying to make, okay? So let's play through this a couple times. I'll include a link to this, again, down below in the doobly-doo. I'll include a link to the Rudiments sheet as well, although I hope you all have that by now. Also, a couple years ago, I did a series of Rudiment a Day, and I will include links to all of the videos I made then about all of those rolls. I basically don't think there's too much more in those videos that I didn't say here, but just in case you want to check out me be a little bit nerdy for a couple minutes about each of these roll patterns. Okay, so let's play through this. And I'm going to use the gum rubber pad, even though I have the pad that sounds a little bit more like a snare drum, because the whole point of this is to give you the idea of how it'll sound on a pad, because I already showed you how it sounds on a snare. We're going to do this at, let's do 3 different tempos. We'll do, my goal is 130, okay? We'll do 80, and then 105, and then 130. So here it is at 80. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now let's try 105. One, two, ready, go. Okay, and now let's try 130, which is what I was shooting for in the performance last week. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's about the tempo that I think is right for that. I wrote it as Allegro, which 130 is a teeny bit on the low side of Allegro. But I think too much faster and it would start to sound a little bit confused, especially some of those offbeat 16th notes might just start to sound like random notes. And I've never been a fan of random notes. Okay, so that's going to do it for our lesson for today. A little bit of a different lesson, lots of rudiments, a few different techniques for a couple different roles that we haven't talked about before. And then we're wrapping up our snare solo that we've done the last couple weeks. Next week, we are going to dive into some triplet concepts. So I encourage you to review triplets, and next week we'll talk about some ways to manipulate triplets that are kind of cool, I think. Okay, so that's going to wrap week 14, wow, crazy, of your first year of drum lessons. I really appreciate you being with me today. If you liked this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. It would be awesome if you subscribe to the channel. That helps me, and I like to think it helps you too. Keep up with the videos that are going on here. If you want to make certain that you don't miss any of my videos, why don't you hit that little bell notification icon, and then YouTube will send you a notification when I upload videos, and then you won't miss anything. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Penny Larson Drums, and I would love to connect with you there as well as here. Friday on our drum set edition of our lesson, we're going to be playing some buzz rolls, some multiple bounce rolls on the snare drum, just so you can see how that sounds. We're also going to be talking about some of these rolls on the drum set and see how they work in that context. But until then, that's all for now. I hope you all are doing well, staying sane, staying safe. These are, I say this every single time, these are interesting times. And in a couple years, we will look back on this time and be like, whoa, that was crazy, eh? But the thing is, time just keeps on moving, and time just keeps on moving. That's why we can drum, right? The regular progression of time is the only reason that we can make these crazy rhythms, is because time is predictable, at least on our plane of existence, right? I don't want to get into, there are some quantum mechanics theories about whether time exists at all, and those just make me cry, because without time as a drummer, our job is over, right? So anyway, I have shifted to rambling, as you can tell. I apologize. I will see you all Friday, if not sooner, I think Friday. And until then, take care. I love you guys so much. Take it easy. Bye.